Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the After Stangs Show. I am Billy Embody here at the bottom of Amon G. Carter Stadium after SMU's 34-17 loss to TCU here Saturday. That 11 a.m. kick, SMU came out, drove the ball down the field, came away with 3 points. But from then on, it was, for the most part, all TCU. They really dictated kind of the tempo of this game. They dictated whatever they wanted to do offensively from a yardage standpoint and putting, drives together. And SMU had a lot of miscues too. So we're going to get a lot of reaction in here for you guys on this post-game edition. But I do feel like the thing that we've got to lead off with is third down, fourth down, critical situational play calling, execution, however you want to look at it. I haven't had a chance to rewatch the whole game, but did watch it live, and then the TV was about a play and a half behind throughout it. And for SMU, they finish 5 of 15 on third downs, 1 of 3 on fourth downs. And I think this is one of those things where we talked about it going into this game. The keys to this game for SMU were to capitalize on opportunities in the red zone and score touchdowns. First drive, I believe a 14-play drive for SMU. They go down the field, they control it, and they burn 6-13 off the play clock, off the game clock, and you get down inside the TCU 10-yard line, and then you can't get a 3rd and 1. And Preston Stone was tackled on the play. From my vantage point, it looked like one of those things where he should have given the ball. SMU was having a lot of success running it with Kamar Wheaton on that drive. They were able to really get a lot of things going in the run game. And after the game, Rhett Lashley addressed that play where I asked him specifically if Preston Stone, was that what happened there? What happened with that play call and that situation? And I think it's, from what I gathered from what Rhett said, it is an RPO. It is not a zone read. And I think he even mentioned the TCU guy jumping up into it to kind of blow up that RPO aspect of it. And unfortunately, Preston tucked it, tried to get upfield as best he could, but SMU was not able to pick up the first down. They end up burning a timeout early, which for me, I think is, and Rhett said after the game that and we'll talk about the timeouts. I'm not going to make you listen to his whole answer, but he said on that one, he was unsure if he wanted to go for it or not, and he didn't like the look. And so they ended up taking a timeout and kicking a field goal. My thing on that play, when you're at the TCU 6-yard line, we see kind of NFL teams do this too, where they'll get up there and they'll at least try to, draw them off sides, pick up a first down, whatever. And if not, they take a 5-yard penalty, and it actually, it's not as sharp of an angle for your kicker. So Colin Rogers' struggles from long aside this season, I felt like burning that timeout, unless you were going to draw something up based on what you saw, that was one where right off the bat, I'm thinking, man, they're going to want that one back. And the next 2 timeouts, we'll cover them real quickly. Defensively, they did not feel like they had the right call on for what TCU had out there, and so they burned that timeout there. I'll try to see how TCU ended up on that drive. They ended up scoring a touchdown. Chandler Morris ended up converting a 3rd and 13 2 plays later. They did get an incomplete pass on the play after that defensive timeout, but TCU was still able to get down inside the SMU red zone after that 3rd down conversion and convert on a 4th and 1 where they kind of ran like a full house type of thing and an option sweep with JP Richardson picking it up. A missed tackle there, I'm pretty sure, by SMU kind of allowed that to pick up that 4th down conversion. And then they hit Jared Wiley for the opening touchdown for TCU that put them up 7-3 pretty much at the end of the first quarter. Both teams held the ball for a good amount of time. There wasn't too much choppiness in the possessions in that first quarter. But during that first quarter, the 3rd timeout that SMU burned was on a 4th and 1, backed up at their own 11, and from what Rhett said after the game, there was an injury situation, and SMU was trying to treat that player while getting the healthy guy onto the field, and there was a miscommunication, and so they didn't want to take a penalty and get backed up even closer to your goal line, especially coming off of an OU game 2 weeks ago where they got a punt block. So that was, and he took the blame completely for basically all three of them, in a way. And I think for me, that early third down where he ends up kicking the field goal was pretty critical in the course of the game, and just kind of the mindset. Remember, and I give Rhett Lashley a lot of credit. We've talked about the jet sweeps not working, the reverses, all the window dressing. SMU didn't do much of that this week against TCU, if at all. I didn't see any of it in the live watch. And but the mindset to kick a field goal there, while the points are great, you don't want to come away with nothing. Maybe that aggressiveness might pay off. Remember, Rhett Lashley was the offense coordinator in 2019 when SMU did come out and was throwing some gadgets and all those things out there with early in that game. They were able to score an opening touchdown, and he said that after the game. It means a lot to get those type of touchdowns. But Rhett Lashley did talk about the early third down impact. So here's kind of what he said with just how that kind of impacted the game overall.
We had such a good drive. I felt like we needed something there, even though, field goals aren't going to win a game like this. Normally I'd go for it. But those are the little things that decide games like this. There's 4 or 5 of those in the first half, and maybe we're ahead at half. So, and then in the second half, give them credit. Third quarter, they went down, kicked the field goal. We went 3 and out. They went down. Defense held them twice to field goals, which was great. At some point we got to break through and get on the board and respond and answer quickly.
And Preston Stone today finished 16 of 35, 2 interceptions, 258 yards. He was sacked 3 times, and one of those was at the end of the game. I think Sonny Dykes, which it was either really petty or it was he really wanted the safety. Either way, called the timeout, hoping to get that reviewed on that final SMU offensive possession. But this is a passing game right now that has to find some consistency, and they do not have a number one guy. Even Jake Bailey, who you thought coming into this one would, be somebody that SMU is really going to be able to get going and get cooking, just with the way he played last year against this defense, the way he played against Oklahoma, the way he's been key this year. 1 catch, 5 yards on 1 target. So SMU not able to get who is really their top receiver going in this one. SMU was led by Moochie Dixon. He had 11 targets, just 4 receptions, though, 44 yards. Jordan Hudson, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 50 yards. And SMU did not have a passing touchdown in this one. And this offense is just still I hate to go back to this, but they are a click away from clicking. And there are some, in this particular game, I felt like there were some major play calling on third down and situational issues when it came to, looked like the box was stacked. So what does SMU do? They run into it twice, third down, fourth down. I think one was with Kamar, and then one was with Jalen Knight in those back-to-back runs when they did push and they did go for it. I think it was their second drive. I could be wrong on that. But then you look at, the other opportunities where the box looks like, at least to me as an outsider, this is you got to run against this, but they don't. And unfortunately for SMU, they didn't get it on 4th and 2 at the TCU 27. What do the Frogs do? They turn around, go right down the field, and score a touchdown. And I think when you go through this game and you were thinking, okay, somebody in this passing game has to step up and make a play when it's needed, I just think there's a combination of a little bit of timing with Preston Stone, and then also just a little bit of like nastiness in terms of going after the ball. There was a deep shot to Keyshawn Smith, and I commented somebody in the press box that It wasn't that he didn't try. He just didn't try to go through the defender to go and make the play. If he goes through that defender to try and make the play, they're either they're likely, I would say, because the defender was not turned, he was not playing the ball, he was in Keyshawn's grill. If he goes after that hard, maybe they're forced to call pass interference there. And SMU hasn't gotten many of those this season. They haven't gotten a lot of those flags. Obviously, Rashee Rice last year, he had that ability to draw them left and right. But when you don't have somebody that is stepping up to be a complete and total alpha right now, it's a bad recipe for this passing offense. And I think Rhett Lashley did say, Preston was gutty. He missed some throws. He wasn't great, but he, wasn't bad. And, I think his overall comments really just covered that well.
In terms of Preston, he competed. He was gutty. He missed a few throws. The first pick, third and forever, if you're not down 17, you probably call a different play. But when you're down 17, you got to try to force it a little bit. And ball got tipped up and they made a pick. And the worst part was we let him run all the way back to the 9. We did hold him to a field goal there. And then the last one, it's a heck of a play by their kid. We had him one-on-one on corner out. I didn't think it was a bad throw or decision. Kid just made a great play. But overall, I don't know. We'll look at it. I'm not going to say he played great. No, we didn't win. But he competed. Just like the first 3 games, I never felt anything different than he was locked in. He had a good look in his eye, and he's like everybody else. He's really disappointed.
Yeah, and I think as you enter conference play, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the podcast, but when you look at what opportunities SMU has had, TCU, I feel like, made it tougher on SMU in a way defensively to complete passes. I felt like their secondary was much better than Oklahoma from a matchup perspective. And whether it be they were in man coverage and playing tighter, whether it be even when they were mixing up things at times and going a little zone that drop 8, I just feel like the windows against TCU were tighter, and you've got to give them credit. They made plays. They've got some good athletes on the back end, without a doubt. I mean, Josh Newton, Avery Helm, Bud Clark had an interception. They made some plays on the back end of the secondary to make sure things weren't there. But I feel like there's just a disconnect right now in this passing attack. But for SMU to come out and run the ball for, let's see, what they have, 158 yards on the ground is pretty encouraging, I felt like, against a TCU front that is designed to stop that run. They're supposed to rally to the ball very well. This defensive line has some big bodies. They've got some athletes that were recruited for this level. And SMU's offensive line, I felt like, gave Preston Stone a ton of time. I thought Kamar Wheaton, who got the start today, we dropped that on the board for those of you who are subscribers to On the Pony Express ahead of time. But 16 carries, 73 yards, and a touchdown. He went over the top to finish that drive. Jalen Knighton, who ended up being banged up, 8 carries, 47 yards. And Tyler Levine even came in, 5 carries, 26 yards. And I think, and we could really go in depth on play calling overall in just certain moments, but I felt like opening the second half, 3 straight pass plays when you got the ball back after TCU had just gone down and scored. That was a little, I think, I got to believe, it didn't, the plays didn't work. Rhett Lashley would like them back if they don't work, but I got to believe that sequence overall, which was kind of disjointed a little bit in the passing game, he'd want that back. And so TCU was able to, open the second half and kick a field goal to make it 17-10, and then kicked another field goal after that drive that went 3 and out in the second half. And, I don't know. We talk about this on the board a lot. People are ready for Rhett Lashley to give up play calling. I think one, and this kind of ties into the larger piece of this game, right? SMU is expected, with what they spend, with what resources they have, to go out and win this game. That's the expectation. OU was wow, nice to hang around. People were disappointed because they lost, but this is a game where TCU lost a lot off of that national championship game, but Sonny Dykes had them ready to go. And I felt like SMU was ready to go in a sense, like opening the game. You drive all the way down the field. You do that. For SMU, they were able to, hold TCU. They didn't, give up any points on their first drive, but then it just kind of, TCU just kind of got going, and they were able to, have more complete drives in it. The time of possession ended up being pretty even. I think it was like 30 minutes to 29 minutes. It was basically even, but TCU just was able to sustain a little bit more here and there throughout it, and they also go really fast. So TCU ended up running 77 plays, 74 plays, so not a bad disparity there either. But I don't think, and maybe it is something down the line that Rhett Lashlee might change. Even when he was hired and we all knew he was going to call the plays, he said he took it very much like, well, for this year for sure, that's the plan. And then we asked him again in the spring, he's going to call him this year. Maybe it is something that changes, but I don't think if you're asking for a midseason change, there's not going to be anything that happens on that front. Rhett Lashlee is really good at calling plays right now between the 25s. And I don't think many people would argue with that. Even today, what did I see? I didn't see any trickery. I didn't see any gadget plays. And guess what? SMU didn't need them. They didn't need any of that to at least be in this game. TCU just made the plays when it mattered, and that's why you see, one, the score disparity. But even when it was 27-17 and SMU closes it to that, like, that was a good drive. That was what you want to see. I wish they had more urgency, because instead of 2 minutes to go, you're looking at an opportunity to maybe, if you could push it a little bit more and play with a little bit more pace, maybe you're looking at a 4-minute situation when TCU would get the ball back, or, maybe the onside kick is a different situation, because SMU still had 3 timeouts when they gave TCU the ball back after making it 27-17. So what has to change here, and Joe Gillespie is kind of, a thorn in SMU's side, is the situational calls or execution, whatever it is. I haven't rewatched, the coaches are going to watch, whatever. Those things have to improve. And I thought the timeouts perfectly kind of encapsulated, this game from a frustration standpoint for the fans. But what is still very much on the table is a conference championship. You played 2 top 25 teams. You played well at Oklahoma. You missed opportunities. That's why you didn't win the game. Very simple. And a block kick. And then against TCU, TCU pretty much controlled it. I felt like after those early drives where SMU went down the field, the defense got a stop, and then that 3 and out, TCU then kind of started rolling. But at the end of the first quarter, you're looking at a 7-3 lead. You're looking at a game at the half that is that's 14-10. You're not looking at something that is off the reservation as far as how bad it is. And I'll end on this. I thought Kamar Wheaton, and not end the podcast, but end up on the offense for the most part on this. Kamar Wheaton's game today, I thought you got to feel really good for him, because say what you want about how he came in and the highly touted, transfer and all of those things. He's had a lot going on, and he's been slowly working on getting himself in the right situation. And you could tell his teammates were really happy for him after the game.
That was awesome. Myself, I'm pretty sure Zay has known Kamar since we were little kids. And to see Kamar go out and just beat Kamar today was awesome. It was like we were playing middle school football again. He was doing his thing. We'd never practiced. No one had ever talked about him jumping over the line for a touchdown. That was all Kamar. So that was really, really cool to see. And I was really, really proud of Kamar and all this stuff.
Been knowing him since we were kids and we were young. So it was good to see him back in his element, playing this game that he loves. It was great to see, a childhood friend, going out there and just enjoying the game. So absolutely super happy for him, man.
And so you can have a little bit positive. You got to feel a lot better about SMU's offensive line. You got to feel better about Kamar Wheaton. Jalen Knighton held onto the ball. He showed some wiggle. He had some nice runs, 5.2 yards per carry. this whole loss, and Rhett said it, we'll touch on it, right here. Right now, the offense is just not clicking, and they're just not good.
Look, that's the deal. Offensively, we're not playing bad, but we're not playing good. And we're moving the football on just about anybody we play. We're two teams that are contend to win the Big 12 and have really good defenses, as you've seen. But you can't win scoring 17 points, and you can't win if you can only play between the 20 and 25-yard lines. And so, if we're not explosive, we got to find a way to finish those drives if we want the results to be different.
And it's disappointing. And I think for, me, seeing Rhett Lashley talk about the execution, talk about the play calling, but ultimately he owned this one too. And I think that he said that in the postgame. I know somebody said he didn't take responsibility in the radio interview. I didn't hear it. The radio interview is done by the school. It's state media. So I don't know what really you want to say, but I know people live and die by the radio. Rich Phillips does a great job, Scott Garner and Steve Lansdale, but it's state media. So I just don't know what you want to say, but when you get in front of the media, he was able to take some ownership too.
Our kids played hard. They fought their butts off. Our staff had a great plan. I've got to do a better job. This one's on me. I've got to find a way to get us in position to break through in these kind of games because we expect to win them.
And so for SMU, it's truly the case, right? Like you have Rhett Lashley, who's kicked the door down on the Tulsa issues. He beat Houston on their way into the Big 12. He finished strong last year. But, last year at Maryland, we saw pretty much the same thing where they got down there, they drove, they didn't get a fourth down, they had to kick a field goal, they didn't capitalize on these opportunities. And so as SMU moves in the ACC and still plays TCU next year, you've got to learn from this situation. And the situation is you got to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of going for it. And I think that's something where maybe he is still finding his way. I don't know. I don't know how much analytics is in it. I don't know what the weight is between that gut. But I felt like even though Preston was tackled short and it was a 4th and 2 instead of a 4th and 1, I get the sense that you go for it because it's so early. It's like the timeouts, like Rhett Lashley was talking about how the timeouts, like in the first half, they just, didn't want something crazy to happen, basically. And in those scenarios, especially on the defense and special teams, that's why they called them. Well, and he also said it's early in the game. It's, you want them, but you don't want that to happen. But at the end of the day, it is the first half. It's the same thing with going forward early on 4th down. I felt like SMU had a ton of momentum. I mean, they whipped TCU on that opening drive. The only thing that hurt SMU was incomplete passes that Preston Stone short-armed on a screen, that short-armed one to RJ Maryland. And look, RJ Maryland, 6 targets, 3 receptions, 44 yards. Not a bad game. I know he came into his sophomore season. You got to remember, he is a true sophomore. He is not a redshirt sophomore or some crazy 4th-year sophomore because of COVID. He's, still a year removed from high school, and he's been around now for a while, and he's expected to take a big jump, but he hasn't done that just yet. And so I know somebody asked about RJ Maryland, Jordan Curley, outside of the 51-yard reception for him, didn't end up doing much. That was his only reception on 1 target. But for me, you've got to find a way that your rotation gets better. And Rhett Lashley kind of talked about it in terms of, maybe shortening the bench. They've got it. It's kind of both ways, right? You can keep your receivers fresh. You also have maybe more consistency or rhythm if you're not rotating as much. And I think the same thing comes with the run game. But, look, for SMU, and somebody asked on the board is, if SMU goes 10-2, can you really feel good about how we ended on the 2 big games of the year? I assume he's asking if you could feel good about the season. Yes. Like you gotta, it'd be the first championship in SMU, modern history for football, which is crazy, but it's the reality of it. Like this is an AAC caliber, a championship caliber team. And I know people want to look at the two big games and say well, they didn't get it done and they look bad, especially against TCU or whatever. But guys, I mean, there are some bad teams in the AAC this year. I mean, that's just the reality. There are teams that are taking a step up, like Rice. Looks like they're going to be a little bit more formidable. East Carolina is a tough out. Usually Memphis, games like that. But I mean, you're still looking at a Charlotte team that's really bad opening. In your opening game of the conference. I think Louisiana Tech would have no problem with them, quite honestly. But SMU boat raced Louisiana Tech. So this is not something to blow it up. And I know we do this live reaction. People have emotions and they're seeing red on the board or what they saw. But when you look at some of the other bright spots, you flip over the defensive side of the ball. And for me, watching it, and I know this is going to sound stupid or whatever, but I mean, they gave up, let's basically call it 27 points, 34 points. I mean, in reality, Jahari Rogers, lets Chase Curtis behind him on that 4th and 2 play action by Chandler. He can't do that. And then he's able to walk in for the touchdown and the final, nail in the coffin. That's execution. You can't do that. But this is a defense that certainly bent. They also forced a lot of field goals. What their issue is once again, no turnovers. They've got to find a way to come away with the football. And I don't know what needs to happen. Obviously, TCU is very good at keeping the ball. That was kind of the same recipe last year when they were in Dallas. But this is a team that, was able to really kind of hold their own. TCU really broke out in the second half, in particular, when it came to the run game. In the first half, it was 26 yards rushing. In the second half, it was 166. And that's disappointing. I felt like TCU, and look, that 3 and out, for example, to open the second half offensively for SMU, that impacts that defense and what they're able to do from they were gassed. They were gassed in that third quarter. I think by the end of the third quarter, it got a little bit more respectable in terms of the time of possession. But I'll try to look it up right now. But SMU at one point, I know it was about 8 minutes to 34 seconds of game time that TCU had the ball in the third quarter. Ended up being 9:45 to 5:15. So for SMU, that I feel like the defense, they did some good things. 6 of 15 on third downs. They also had the 3rd and 5 the 4th down conversions were 3 of 5 for TCU. TCU was able to, take advantage of opportunities. And some of those 3rd down conversions, they were long conversions. I mean, TCU, if I could try to find it here, their average 3rd down distance to go was 6.5 yards per 3rd down to go. In the first half, at one point, it was like 7 or 7.5. So it's a defense that had opportunities. Like Charles Woods had 2 3rd down conversions caught on him that were good throws, but he was right there, couldn't make a play. And TCU just made them today. And you've got to give credit to him for it. That's how Rhett Lashley's play calling, I feel like in certain moments certainly hurt SMU. But TCU had that killer instinct to go take the game when they had the opportunity to. And I think that's maybe something SMU's still working toward. I don't know if it's a mindset. I felt like SMU came out and was in good shape when it came to going down the field right away, when it came to forcing a stop on TCU's first drive. But when you look at what SMU is doing right now, it pretty much lies with the offense. I said it before this game, you really need to keep TCU below 30 points. And, you have to kick an onside kick. And so TCU gets a short field for that last touchdown. But they pretty much did their job. I mean, they held them to 457 total yards, which is against this offense. And, how fast they go wasn't terrible. Their tackling was poor at times. And it was more so than it was against Oklahoma, which is concerning because I felt like that piece of the defensive showing was the hardest, was unexpectedly bad for me. But where TCU challenges SMU versus Oklahoma is that tight end, Jared Wiley, really, really good football player, led TCU with 37 yards receiving, 5 catches, 2 touchdowns. That's efficient. But on the flip side of things, Chandler Morris had a great ability to escape. SMU only got home on him twice. You want to see a little bit more. I felt like they had a decent amount of pressure, but they've got to continue to get better at it. So, look, Isaiah Wacobia, he was there at the post-game press conference. He's not losing faith in what this defense can do long term.
I feel like most of it was self-inflicted wounds. It's just alignment, assignment technique, the little things that we just got to get cleaned up. They're a good team, but I feel like it was more on us than self-inflicted wounds that we just got to get fixed on our end.
So when we look ahead, and we'll close out with this, when we look ahead to what this team has ahead of it, so it has a pretty poor conference that it's battling. They don't play Tulane in the regular season. They don't play UTSA. Say what you want about UTSA. They don't play them. They have everything ahead of them. And that's the reality of it. And I think for me, seeing Preston Stone, seeing Isaiah Wacobia, they were emotional after this loss. And maybe it was built up so much that SMU had done this and that, and the defense and, NIL and going to the ACC. And so it was just this massive letdown, and that's why they're feeling it. But I think, and I said this last year, and this is why in part SMU was able to finish as well as they did. That team cared. I think this team cares. I don't know if it's going to be perfect offensively this year going into conference play. There's too many questions to say that, but this team cares. And I think at times that can go a long way.
Obviously, you guys know how much this game means to us. It's a rivalry game. We worked so hard, and of course we're disappointed. But we're just ready to get back to the drawing board, go back to work, and practice this week.
Yeah, me personally, just incredibly disappointed. This was a tough one. Especially disappointed in myself. It's big time games, rivalry games. When you're going up against a good team, and the guys around you are playing well, defense is getting stops. It's the quarterback that has to step up and make plays and get the team rolling. And I don't feel like I did that today.
And look, Rhett Lashley kind of echoed that. They've got to get back on track. They've got to stick together through this. And at the end of the day, guys, last year they were in the same situation. 2 high-profile football games being played in the non-conference slate, and they were able to rally, even with more losses that came against UCF, Cincinnati. They were able to rally and finish strong in the season. But Rhett wasn't shying away that they've got to figure out ways to win these games. And I think you can look at this game, and I said we'd find out a lot about Rhett Lashley and kind of just where the program is going from a big game perspective, because recruiting is up. You see the 2025 class. You see they got Brandon Booker this week. They're going to roll again in the transfer portal. I mean, that those things are true. So they're going to keep addressing their roster. They're going to keep getting better. But you still have to break through and win a game like this. And to not get it today with all the things that happened this offseason in terms of players coming in, look at what the defense did against OU now. There's some confidence brewing. They're just a click away offensively. That's where this game is a gut punch, because the expectation is to win this game. And they needed, I said this before the season, they needed to split 1 of 2 when it comes to TCU and Oklahoma. They go over to 2-2 going into conference play. Now the question will be next year, well, can SMU break through and win the big one? Because, they go on the road at Vanderbilt, and say what you want about Vandy, but they're an SEC team. They need to go win at Vandy next year they need to win both of those games. I mean, that's the progression of what this team should be. And I don't even know what TC looks like next year. We can get to that way down the line. But you've got to break through and you've got to win this game. And, Rhett broke through and beat Houston, sent them on their merry way. Broke through against Tulsa. Those are the minor challenges with a roster last year that you felt worse about. SMU didn't really have much help defensively at all last year, and you won those games. I know Houston was a shootout, but then you get into this season, you say, well, you brought in so many players to help defensively and do all of that, and you lose this game. It's disheartening, and it's disheartening for a lot of fans, and a lot of fans now are going to say, well, Rhett Lashley in this big game in the battle for the Iron Skillet the next 2 years, because he's going to be here the next 2 years, barring something crazy. You better win one of two. You need to get us one, because otherwise, that'll be 4 straight. That would be something where while the game's going away, a lot of people are going to say, well, he's going to have to, really show me, because that's where today's tough. Because SMU could still go accomplish all their goals, and Rhett Lashley will talk about that in a second, but they could still go accomplish all their goals. But just the timeouts, the third down play calling, little things throughout the game, there are some people that it's going to take a minute for them to buy back into certain aspects. But you can lose this game and still very much recognize, not only from Rhett Lashley's perspective, but just overall, that everything is still ahead of you. You can absolutely go win this conference and go take care of business and capture a championship and move on to the ACC.
Everything that's still in front of us, all the goals we had to start the season in terms of, trying to compete for our conference and put ourselves in position to be in contention is still there. It gives you confidence, but we expected to compete in these games. So we've got to find a way to pick ourselves up, and we got a home conference opener next week, and we really need to get to 1-0 before the bye week in the league. I love this team. I believe in this team. If this team will stay together, I think we got a chance to still do something special, and it's going to be hard. As far as our program goes, we did. We played 2 really good Big 12 opponents on the road, but we expect to belong in those atmospheres, and nothing has happened that makes me think our future is not extremely really bright here.
So he went on to kind of say a lot more of the same there, but for SMU, you're recruiting well. You continue to address, the roster through the portal. You're doing things at a high level. You're going to have the ACC logo on your chest. That should help you as you build this roster up, because it's not perfect. It's a lot better. And especially defensively, even after today, it's a lot better. But you have to win some of these games. You still have all of those things ahead of you when it comes to being able to, capitalize on all of that. So Sonny Dykes doesn't have a Rhett Lashley's number. Like, this isn't a game where, I think TCU capitalized on their opportunities. This isn't Kirk Ferentz versus Matt Campbell here. This is, last year, perfect storm. TCU came out with a national championship runner-up team and beat SMU. And this year, it's more disappointing because of all the things SMU did to address it, and they didn't capitalize. So it's 2 very different losses. But at the end of the day, SMU under Rhett Lashley now 0-2 in the battle for the Iron Skillet with him as head coach. So next year they're going to have to circle the wagons and get this one. There's not many left, and it doesn't look like they're coming back anytime soon. So a very disappointing loss for SMU. I was very surprised by just kind of how disjointed things looked at times throughout this game. But I thought the defense played really hard. It's always something to build on there. They just absolutely have to keep trying to work tackling and do all of those things. But SMU's now through their toughest offense that they're going to face in the regular season by far. That TCU offense, that is kudos to Chandler Morris. He made a ton of plays. I've watched him a lot since high school. He's one of those guys, talking to even some national reporters before today. It's kind of like, how do you feel about Chandler Morris? Well, he went out there today and was 23 of 32. At one point, he was 13 of 15, 261 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. They didn't turn the ball over. And even he was talking some noise at the end of the game. He didn't like that hit he took on the end of when he slid down. So, he's got that moxie, he's got that swagger, and, Sonny Dykes had his guys ready to play too for the most part. So, again, TCU's just, continuing to show kind of where they're at as a program that SMU needs to kick that door down and get past, because it's a disappointing loss. They've got to bounce back. They can't let this one beat them next week when SMU plays Charlotte at Ford Stadium, because that would be catastrophic. I don't think that happens. I think SMU can take care of business against Charlotte. I don't think they're a very good team at all. But this is a team that is way too talented to have what happened here today happen to them. But it was not all bleak. Run game was impressive against a front that's tough to run against. The offensive line was awesome. I thought they were great. Justin Osborne was hurt. And then defensively, they were able to bow up and hold them to some field goals. And there's still some positives to take away from this. But right now, a lot of questions around SMU offensively. So with that, guys, going to wrap up this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. We'll have a lot more post-game coverage for you guys with our final takeaways. But that'll do it for the After Stangs Show. I've got to get out of here and head back to home. So with that, hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the After Stangs Show. At least getting my thoughts on it. Game was a rough one, but we'll be back next week live in Mockingbird Plaza from Shug's Bagels after SMU takes on Charlotte to open AAC play. So thanks for listening. Have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy a cold one after this one, or a few, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening.